Morning, everybody. We're just waiting for a
Morning.
few other joiners, so just bear with us. We'll get started in a minute or two. Just waiting for a few other people to drop in. So
Oh, I was going to say everyone's very quiet, but then they've got the microphones and the camera switched off. So I was like,
yeah, I think it automatically does that on these types of recording. I'm more than happy to let people turn them on if you want them to, though. That's fine.
yeah, I think that'd be good.
Yeah, it should actually allow them to be fair, but
I
let me
I can
just.
turn mine on, Claire. So I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
yeah. I think
Um,
that's because you're part of Cube HR,
well,
though.
I didn't know whether I had special dispensation.
Allow participants to turn on camera, allow participants to unmute themselves. There we go. If you want to turn your cameras on and unmute yourselves, guys, you are more than welcome to do so and say hello to us. I think Dan would like some feedback from people, so it would be lovely to be able to see you all if you are able to do that. Allow participants to unmute themselves. Should be able to. Yeah, should be able to join in. Perfect, 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 perfect. We are still waiting on a few more people, but I'm conscious, obviously, of time, everyone's time and Dan's time as well. So I think what we'll do is we'll kind of get started and people will just drop in as we go along. So welcome everybody to our neurodiversity lunch and learn. I will give Dan an introduction very shortly. For those of you that are just joining, if you want to leave your cameras on, great. It's nice to see you. If you do want to unmute at any point, feel free to. Obviously, if you don't want to, if you've got background noise and stuff, that's absolutely fine. We will utilise the chat function anyway on the team system just to make sure that people have got the opportunity to ask questions and stuff. I am recording the session today. It is just for a use of any of the delegates that aren't able to attend for whatever reason, maybe for prior commitments, etc. But if anyone's got any serious objections to being recorded, then please do speak up and let me know, because obviously we'll be able to deal with that. So I'm going to introduce Dan now. So Dan is the Chief Sparkle of NeuroSparks. I've known Dan for quite some time through networking, but Dan's business now, NeuroSparks, works with Cube HR. They're one of our clients, but they also have done some training sessions and done some work with some of our clients as well. Dan is an expert on all things neurodiversity, and he's going to just give us a little bit of a taster today as to a bit of education, I guess, around the different sort of what neurodiversity is, how we can support our teams. If any of you are then interested in making contact with Dan afterwards, I will circulate his contact details out for you if you are looking to do something a bit more in depth with him later on down the line, which I can highly recommend because we've had clients that have done full day sessions with him and they've all reported how fab it is. So Dan, I'm going to hand over to you. If you've got any questions, pop them on the chat, guys. It will come to the questions at a suitable point in Dan's process. So just pop questions on the chat and I will look at that for you. Over to you, Dan.
Well, thank you. So, morning, everyone. So, as Claire, lovely introduction there. So, I'm Dan. I'm Chief Spark here at NeuroSparks Business Solutions. We are a business which has been going for 2.5 years out of adversity, really, because my last employed role, I was the National Learning Manager for an international investor, and I looked after about 12,000 financial advisors. Which we'll come on to in a second. But today is all around neurodiversity. So neurodiversity, why do we need it in the workplace? What is it? But also, how do we support some of the people that we actually support on a daily basis that might be neurodivergent? I myself have ADHD, dyslexia and dyscalculia. My partner, Luke, both in business and in life, he has autism. We have 22 staff, of which 90% of us are neurodivergent, which, as you can imagine, has its own challenges at times as well. So a little bit of a run through around what we're going to be doing today. We're going to have a little bit of a story time. We're going to talk about neurodiversity 101. So what is it and why do we need it within our workplace? We're going to talk about practical inclusion, some practical tips as well on how we can support people who might be neurodivergent. I'm just going to take my glasses off because you're getting a bit of a glare because you can't see my beautiful face. There you go. And also at the end, we're going to have time for some questions and also answers as well. So I am free for the rest of the day. So if this takes till 5 o'clock, I'm absolutely fine with that. I'm sure you guys aren't. But ultimately, it's your session. So I'm more than happy to facilitate that. I've been with Cube HR since day one. We always knew that Cube was going to be the company for us to manage our HR, and it's been amazing that we've been able to grow together along that journey as well. So as Claire said, we've done some really good work with some of their clients, and we had some real positive results from that. So it has been good for the business and amazing for the individuals involved as well. So that's great. So number one rule for today, all I want you to do is be curious. Okay, so if anything from today, I want you to take this word away, curious. I'm also a master NLP practitioner, an integral eye movement therapist, and a metaphors of movement practitioner. And curiosity as a people manager or curiosity as a business owner is the biggest gift that I can actually give you today. Because when you say to your staff, I'm just curious how your ADHD affects you on a day-to-day basis, or I'm just curious why you might have reacted in that way, actually that word curiosity, it takes the venom out of any questions. It's non-judgmental, it's non-threatening to your fellow team members, but also it invites open conversation, which is exactly what you want, especially when you're talking about somebody's vulnerability. You want to be able to be as gentle as possible, but also to be able to get the answers that you need to be able to support them in the best possible way that you can. All right. I firmly believe that nobody comes to work to be a bit of an arsehole. Shall I say it? I've already said it at the start of the meeting. There you go. No one comes to work to be obstructive. No one comes to work to have a meltdown. No one comes to work to flip tables. Ultimately, we don't excuse behavior when it comes to neurodiversity, but what we do is we just need to have that little bit of extra duty of care to find out why they might have behaved that way. Okay, so just be curious. I invite your curiosity today. So just think about this. Okay, you are 4 years old. Okay, and it's Boxing Day. Your dad is away chasing Russian submarines. Okay, so it's only you and your mom. Boxing Day, you wake up and all of a sudden mum is gone. You run out your bedroom, all excited to go and play with your Christmas toys. Your mum is gone. Your Auntie Pat is there that you weren't expecting to see. And she's had to sit down with you and say, oh, by the way, mum's been rushed to hospital. Subsequently died 3 times on the operating table. That was me when I was 4 years old. And those feelings of, if mum is okay, then I'm okay, I've carried on through the rest of my life. Now, I'm pleased to say that mom is okay. She is also one of the directors at Neuro Business Solutions. She's got Crohn's disease and she's got fibromyalgia as well. She works 3 mornings a week for us. That's just been recently reduced because of her health declining. Now, if you can imagine being 4-year-old Daniel and the rest of your life, you have a habitual pattern of, as long as mom is okay, my personal safety, I'm okay. Now you take that into a business environment where you go, as long as everyone else is okay, I'm okay. And you're putting the service of other people always before yourself. That is probably one of the greatest gifts that I'm able to do, but also, as you can imagine, one of the greatest hindrances within my businesses. Because ultimately, I constantly worry, I constantly have that anxiety of, as soon as somebody isn't okay, I automatically go into that fixer mode. All right. And I do strongly believe that there is a strong link between childhood trauma and neurodiversity within the lighter in life. And why do I think that? So I've just completed my PG cert in neurodiversity and I'm about to start my master's in business psychology. And once I've done that, I'm going to go and do a PhD. And I'm going to look at the link between neurodiversity and childhood trauma as part of my research project into becoming Dr. Dan. And I'm only doing PhD, so you can call me Dr. Dan, by the way. So my story, okay? So I'm not sure if you remember, but way back when, McDonald's used to do birthday parties. And boy, did they do birthday parties. They did birthday parties on steroids, right? Even to the point where you got a little kitchen tour past the French fryers bubbling away that you could literally just stick your hand in as a 4-year-old. And boy, did I love my McDonald's parties. But actually, the reason why I put this picture here is because this is my mum. Okay, she is my world. She is my everything. She's my business partner. And she's the reason why we exist. She's the person that actually said, you know what, Daniel, if you want to do this business, I'm in it with you. Let's do it together. Because she sees how much I struggle on a daily basis. Everyone sort of thinks, wow, Daniel, you're so well put together. But actually, behind the scenes, I have my own personal assistant that makes sure that I've got water on my desk, because if I don't have water on my desk, I forget to drink. My team are really good. They will make sure that I have lunch. If I don't have lunch, I'll forget to eat. My number 2 in the business, Kat, she's absolutely amazing. She runs our access to work arm of the business, and she will constantly be checking in on me, making sure that I'm okay and I'm not burning myself out. Ultimately, these are common traits of neurodivergent conditions, but actually when you're a business owner, you always put other people in front of yourself. So I'll come on a little bit later on how we actually support our team and some practical strategies to be able to help your team as well. But ultimately, the reason why I put this picture up is because that is my mum, and that's also my godmother as well. And that there is little me. Okay. So does anyone know where this is? This is the best picture of Blackburn College I could find, right? So let me tell you about this picture. So I went to college. I struggled for education. I got my official diagnosis for dyslexia when I was 16. I knew that I was always different, and I knew that I was thinking different and I thought differently. And that's what sort of captivated me and made me really curious about NLP, so neuro-linguistic programming, because I always thought differently from other people. I could see things differently. And I don't mean like I see dead people in the sixth sense. I mean, I see things that people don't necessarily see that might be in front of them. And I'm really good at problem solving. I am very, very calm in a chaotic situation. Whereas Luke, my other half, he is so good. He's so intelligent, he's so analytical because of his autism, and he's able to really kind of make things make sense to me when it comes to things like finances and business processes. But after school, sorry, I went and studied media, film, theatre and performing arts. Okay. Anything practical, I was phenomenal at, and I still am. So anything creative, anything practical, what you'll find is those people within marketing, within campaigns, within social media management, those who are very practical, whether it be construction, those that might be plumbers, those who might be in some sort of trade, that are arts and crafts makers, that kind of stuff. You will normally find that they tend to sway towards the ADHD and dyslexia side because if it's the creative right side of the brain. Whereas what you'll find in the workplace is those people that are very process driven, those people that like to work in binary, black and white, those people like in finance, engineering, science, those people that work in processes tend to be on the autism side of the spectrum. When you come to neurodivergent conditions. Now, what I'm not saying is that everyone who's creative, everyone who is in finance might be autistic or got ADHD, but those are some of the common traits that we see those people in. So I went to college, found out I was dyslexic. And what happened then was I remember sitting in an exam, and the exam was in performing arts and theatre studies, and it was all about the Brechtian style of theatre. And we had a whole question bank on Brechtian style of theatre and why it was so important at the time. I looked at the question, I just got up and walked out because I couldn't decipher what they were trying to ask me on that paper. And then it was from that moment on, I promised myself I would never go back into education. Kind of worked out not very well because obviously I went back to uni and I'm going back to uni, but that's a different part of the story. So actually I went straight into work, and somebody who has studied media, film, theatre and performing arts, what do? Of course, what do they go and do? They go into banking. All right. So I started my journey in banking at the ripe age of 18. Now, Santander, sorry, the Red Bank, we'll call it, knew about my neurodivergent conditions at the time, so dyslexia and dyscalculia. And what would happen is someone would come to me and pay into the branch. I'll go, right, Daniel, can I pay £610 off my mortgage? And I go, absolutely. Count the money out. Right, I'd write it on a piece of paper, £610, and the breakdown that they paid me, because that's what we did at the time. Brilliant, great. But what I do is I would type into the keyboard, instead of saying 610, I'd put £160. And that's a really common trait when you've got dyscalculia, because what happens is you transpose figures. Okay, and it's very similar when you have dysgraphia. So dysgraphia is 4 letters and dyscalculia is all about numbers. Okay. So what I would do very often is I would transpose figures. What I'd also do is I would struggle with mental arithmetic. So if I have to work something out in my head, I would really struggle. So I'd always have to have a calculator with me. Now, if I'm typing in the incorrect numbers, what do we think is happening at the end of the day when I'm balancing my till? Let me ask you that question. Oh, by the way, if I ask a question,
definitely not going to balance.
there we go. There we go, right? So what is ultimately going to happen is it comes to the end of the day and I go to balance my till and it's going to be wrong. You know, I'm getting stressed going, am I going to get sacked? And they're like, don't worry, Dan, just go through all of your transactions for the whole day and then you'll be able to find it. So I did. One of the reasonable adjustments they put in place is, right, Dan, before you balance and before you go home, just do a balance 2 hours before everyone else, just so that you can kind of get a feeling if you're going to balance the till or not. And if you balance great, that means you've only got an extra hour or two to go until the end of the day. And then what would happen is from that is it would go, right, Dan, you're not balancing your till. So why don't you, before lunchtime, balance your till, and before you go home, before everyone else, balance your till then. And then it got to, right, Dan, every hour, why don't you balance your till? And then it got to, right, Dan, we need to have a conversation. Okay, we need to have a conversation. So let me ask you on the call this question. What happened then? Got called into the manager's office. What happened? Don't be shy. Come on.
I'm assuming you walked away without a job.
Yeah. So that was potentially one of the outcomes. What else do we think happened? Anyone got any advances on getting sacked? Okay. So what actually happened is they promoted me. Yeah. Why do you think they promoted me?
Take you away from trying to balance 10 times a day. Give you something that maybe played to your strengths better.
There we go. So I wasn't great at counting money, but what they realized was I was absolutely fantastic at speaking to people and helping people. And actually, just by coincidence, by speaking to people and going outside of my comfort zone when I first started, it meant that I was one of the top referrers in the region in terms of other areas of the bank of the business. So they promoted me. I was 19 at the time. I also had my first child on the way as well. So Ellie, she's also neurodivergent. She's just started uni a couple of weeks ago. And ultimately, they promoted me to a personal banker. I did absolutely fantastic at that job. I was helping people with bank accounts, credit cards, savings accounts. I was really going above and beyond. And because of that, I actually, by the age of 21, was a bank manager. So I skipped assistant manager because it was the assistant manager's job to balance the branch. There you go. So I didn't have to count money. So I kind of went straight to bank manager. I managed Padiham, Haslingden, and also Preston branches, none of which are still there today. None of my fault, I can assure you. But ultimately, that kind of just proves that if you sit down and understand somebody who is neurodivergent and actually say to them, look, we believe that you are on the right bus being the red bus, aka the Santander bus, okay? Actually, at the moment, you're not on the right seat. So let's look and see where you are going to be best seated to the best of your abilities, to the best of your strengths. Now, bearing in mind, this was like 20 years ago. So this was, you know, we didn't really have neurodiversity talking and things like that at that time. And they were quite forward thinking, but also they didn't want to get sued, right? Because one of the things is when you've got your own business or when you're a manager, you have to actually look at the risk. And the accommodations that you give has to be reasonable, but also you have to balance that risk to the business as well. And that's something where Cube can come in and go, right, okay, so that might be reasonable, that might not be reasonable. And that's where me and Cube do work together quite a lot. But ultimately, they actually said, you know what, this is great. We're going to really play to your strengths and we're going to support you with this. But just like any other person with ADHD, what happens? You get bored, right? So once you get bored, you actually look for a new challenge. I call it the 2-year itch. So anyone that's experienced the 2-year itch and gone, oh, I need a little bit more, something to aim towards. But I decided that actually I wanted to get back out there from branch management to getting in front of clients again. So then I became an independent financial advisor. And I had to go through a load of exams, as you would imagine. Pro the Chartered Insurance Institute, did my level 3s. As soon as I did my level 3 exams, the FSA at the time said, right, you need to do level 4 exams. So then I had to go on a whole new journey. And then as soon as I did my level 4 exams, Santander made 1,800 people, the whole of the bank insurance arm redundant. because they'd just been fined £13 million. So I wanted to leave there, start my own business, and ultimately, actually, I was going to go and take 30 grand redundancy payment, go and start my own business. But actually, I wasn't that experienced, so it probably wouldn't have worked. But actually, Santander had different ideas. Because I'd been customer hero for the whole of the bank the year previous, at the time, we didn't realise they were going to keep 77 people on in the country. And I was one of the 77 people that they actually kept on from the 1800. They came to me and told me to reconsider my actual decision because they couldn't guarantee that I would get redundancy. And I was said to them, no, don't worry, I still want my redundancy, I'm good. And they said, no, Daniel, listen to what we're saying. We cannot guarantee that you will get your redundancy if you still want to go. We are deploying you into this new role. So the new role basically meant retraining, new policies, new procedures, new reports, a brand new manager. Okay. He was called Richard. What's the nickname for Richard? Yes, he was a dick. So don't be like Richard. So ultimately, he knew nothing about neurodivergent conditions. He knew nothing about reasonable adjustments, and he had everything in my HR file, which was in front of him. All he had to do was read it, and he didn't. But of course, because of all the changes over a very short period of time, I started making mistakes. And as you could imagine, these mistakes, because in a regulated environment like financial advice, it can be pretty non-forgiving. So it got to the point where Richard, aka Dick, turned around and said, look, Dan, you need to start getting this right. If you say this word wrong one more, and it was literally a word, if you say this word wrong one more time, we're taking you down capability, because as a bank we can't afford to be fined, and we're not taking any chances. So then I went to HR. HR said, look, give him some extra support, give him some breathing room. Richard didn't think it was part of my neurodiversity, just thought I was being absolutely frickered and just not doing what I needed to do. But funnily enough, actually, when I got the support that I needed, I actually performed really, really well. And I left there, became an IFA, left there a company called Cheetham Jackson. Some of you might know that company in the Northwest. And ultimately, I left there when I was head of L&D and moved across to a company called Acorn and Red Mill Advance. And then I started my learning and development journey. And I discovered actually I'm really good at making these complicated subjects really easy and simple to understand. And that was really up until when I started working for Aviva, sorry, another bank, the international place that I shouldn't mention on these calls. And ultimately, I was really struggling. It was Dan on tour. My job as national training manager was Dan on tour. I'd go on tour, do these kind of presentations, but for financial services folks, talking about everything, pensions, investments, mortgages, all of the fun, interesting stuff that we love in life. But what people didn't see was I was really struggling. So I would regularly book the wrong hotels, because I would get confused with the dates. So I'd say, on this date, you're at this place, on this date, you're at this place. But what I didn't realise and take into account is that it's actually an overnight stay. So then I'd just end up booking different hotels. So then I'd had to pay out of my own pocket quite a lot of time, because I didn't want to fess up to my manager. My manager was amazing. I got my first Access to Work award for £14,000 given to me by the DWP, and that was going to be for workplace training, coaching, mentoring, and also some adaptation, software and hardware. And what I actually found out was, even though the DWP pay for all of these, it's the company that has to pay for them if it's a massive, big company like Aviva. So you would go to the HR team, you say, right, these are all my recommendations from the DWP. You know, can you buy this? And then you'll just claim the money back. I thought it would be an easy process, but apparently not, because procurement systems aren't actually set up like that. And they couldn't actually help me. And then I went to IT and said, can you integrate these new systems for me and pop them on my laptop? Because Santander just popped them on my laptop. Yeah, no, we can't do that, because we have to do all of the due diligence, and we have to make sure that they're okay with the systems. They're not going to do any damage internally. And also, you know, we've got a lot of systems that are piling up, so we need to do all of those first. So ultimately, how do you think I felt at that time? Exactly, let down. You know, as a top performer, why aren't you able to support me? If I wasn't a top performer, then you'd be doing everything in your power to make me, you know, as good as I can be. But actually, because it was an invisible disability that I've got, People don't see what goes on behind the doors. And this is what I'm imploring people to understand, is that actually, you know, if somebody started working for you and had a wheelchair, you'd make sure you've got ramps in place. You'd make sure that, you know, they've got access to a lift if you're on a higher floor and all this kind of stuff. But actually, when you talk about invisible disability that is protected under the Equalities Act, you know, you might look at someone and go, well, there's nothing wrong with you. You know, why do I have to go out of my way to do all of this stuff? But actually, you're in a very dangerous position, because what you're doing there is essentially dismissing these people in your staff and going, do you know what, you're not good enough to have this support. And as an individual that's received that information, it's absolutely soul destroying. So ultimately, that's what led me to actually say to my mum, look, mum, I'm feeling like this. There must be tens of thousands of other Dans feeling like this. What can we do? And she said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to start a business that makes an impact, that has purpose, that can actually support people to be the best that they can be, that can actually be their true authentic self on a daily basis, but also helping people to thrive and not just survive when they go to work. You know, people that aren't robots, because we're all as different on the inside as we're on the outside. So when you start treating people exactly the same and expect to communicate and expect to get an answer, you're setting yourself up for failure as a manager, as a business owner, because I'll say it again, we're all as different on the inside as we are on the outside. So as soon as we start to actually understand that and we start to embrace that as a business, we're going to start growing, and we're going to start helping and impacting our wider communities and our clients and our customers, because we're showing them it's okay to be different. It's okay to be neurodivergent. And, you know, as a LGBT accredited business as well, you know, we're already kind of on a back foot when it comes to business, because there are some businesses that just won't want to do business with us because we're an LGBT owned and operated organization. You know, we're a disabled owned and organized operation, you know, so we want to help the people that we can help, you know, and that's all we want to do. So what is neurodiversity? So neurodiversity, a lot of people do say to me, especially in senior roles that have been around in business quite a while, they say to me, look, this neurodiversity lockdown, it's been around, you know, I've not really heard of it, and then all of a sudden there's a massive explosion. Everyone's got ADHD, everyone's got autism, why is everyone doing all of this? You know, it's a buzzword, people are just trying to jump on the bandwagon. Well, actually, the reason why you've probably not heard of it as much until now is because the term neurodiversity was only born in the 90s. And it was born by an Australian sociologist called Judy Singer. And she was studying people, because she's autistic, and she was studying people like herself. And she actually came up with the term neurologically diverse, neurologically different, you know. And sitting on this call, you probably think, well, of course we're all neurologically different. You know, so we're all neurodiverse, and that's what neurodiversity is. It's actually the difference of thinking that we have within the workplace. So neurodiversity in the workplace, the more we have of it, the better it is for the business, the better it is for bottom line profit. But we can't just say that we support neurodiversity in the workplace. We have to do something about it. As a business, as a collective, we can't just say, yep, we support it, you know, on socials, yep, we want to do all of this training, great. We have to make an impact on a day-to-day basis. And what Judy said is that a paradigm shift is needed. A way of thinking needs to be changed. And ultimately, the reason why a paradigm shift is needed is because we need to move away from the deficit model that society currently has. If you take the word disabled, it automatically says you are not abled. Okay, disabled. Now, unfortunately, I hate the word disabled to describe myself and to describe my staff, but ultimately that's the only word that currently fits in today's society, because you cannot get support from the government unless you actually go, I'm disabled, I need support, and then they give you the support. So what we need to do away with is moving away and focusing on our deficits, our deficiencies in life. But what we need to do is we need to move towards a social model. Okay, and that basically is a strength-based model. Okay, so you might not be great at this, but you're really good at this. So let's look and see what we can do in the workplace. Now, sometimes there's things that we just can't do. We can't move people from one role to another, but actually it might be, this person's really bad at this, you're amazing at it. Why don't we do a task swap? Because you're going to get a lot more enjoyment out of doing that than doing the other thing, which you really, really are struggling with, because we know that you don't come to work to make mistakes. And ultimately, it might just be a task swap rather than a full job swap. So actually, you might have one bum cheek on one seat on the red bus and one bum cheek on another seat on the red bus. Brilliant. okay? But ultimately, we're treating individuals as individuals, okay? But it's all about empowerment and inclusion. It's actually about going to the person who is neurodivergent in the organization and saying, I've got this problem, how would you solve it? And what you'll be finding is you will be astounded the things that they come up with, because they think about problems completely differently. It's almost like, for me, I can, there's a video that I show as well on training, which we use from HSBC. And ultimately, they talk about being able to turn problems into 3D models and spin them around and look through them. And that's exactly what I'm able to do in my head, you know. But because I've always been able to do it, I kind of presume that everyone else can do that, but they can't. So people will come to me with problems and I go, oh, that's easy. Let's look at this. Let's look at that. And they're like, how did you even think of that? So your neurodivergent colleagues in your organizations, these are the people that you should be going to if you're struggling with answers, because they think differently. We see things differently and we process things differently for the better. So just as a bit of a 101 there. So neurodiversity is all around the natural variation to thinking, so neurologically diverse. And then neurodivergent is about how an individual thinks or processing differs from the expected norms. And again, I hate the word normal, because what is normal? There's no such thing as normal. Yeah. So it's about thinking or processing and how that differs from those norms that we have. So we're going to get you involved now. We're going to do a bit of a higher or lower exercise. So feel free to take yourself off mute. So the first condition I'm going to give you under the neurodiversity umbrella. So there are 7 conditions that I'm going to ask for. See if you know these. And I'm also going to ask how much of the population, adult population, is thought to have or diagnosed with this condition. So ADHD, so we'll talk about ADHD in a second, but ADHD stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Okay, there are 3 components to ADHD. You're either diagnosed with the hyperactivity component, which is actually the one that everyone is most recognized as naughty school person syndrome, the one that's bouncing off the walls, can see from a mile away. The second one is inattentive, and this is the one that always slips under the radar, especially for women and girls, because this is the one that women and girls mostly have. And this is where we are seeing women who are perimenopausal and menopausal, the crossover, when their hormones start to change, their symptoms are really exacerbated by the inattentive ADHD. And this is the crisis that we're seeing at the moment, because there are so many misdiagnosed girls and women out there who are screaming for help, but just cannot get it because the medical system, the NHS, is not set up to actually diagnose that inattentive behaviour. Things have got a lot better. Okay, there are far more women who are now getting diagnosed and getting the support and the coaching that they need to understand themselves a lot more. But all I would say to you is, if you have somebody who's going perimenopausal or going through the menopause and they're starting to question their purpose, they're starting to question their job, starting to question things that actually I could do 3 months ago and I just can't do them now, so that means that I'm not able to do my job, I need to look for a new job. Actually, let's have that curiosity mindset and just ask and dig a little bit deeper, because there might be other things at play that this individual just does not know about, you know. And then finally, if you're blessed like me, you will have the combined type, and that is both hyperactive and inattentive. So let's have a guess. How much of the population do we think is diagnosed with ADHD or suspects that they've got ADHD? There are 2 figures in this one.
1 in 12.
Okay, so 1 in 12. So what percentage would that be? I'm rubbish at fractions. I'm not sure if I mentioned I've got dyscalculia. There you go. Is that something like 8% or something?
Yeah, 8%.
Okay, not quite. Okay, but Alison, do you know what? You can have a gold star for shouting up. There you go. It's 3 to 4.
Can I just add to that I'm also an ADHD menopausal woman.
Oh, there we go.
Who's just been diagnosed.
Yay, well done, Alison. Thank you for sharing. And this is really important because the more you speak about it, the more it starts to actually become commonplace, and actually it isn't an alien thing. Oh my God, Alison's just said she's got ADHD. What are we going to do? Oh my word, how, you know, ultimately, this is just like a normal thing. We need to treat it as a normal thing, and we just need to give Alison a little bit of extra care and attention to make sure she's got all the tools and resources, and she needs to be an absolutely fantastic employee that she is. So ADHD, between 3 and 4% of the population, it is thought to have ADHD, but only 1.3% is recorded by GPs. All right, why do we think that is? I will tell you why, and that is because of the NHS process. It takes 4 years locally in the Northwest to get diagnosed with ADHD, okay? And you have the right to choose method, which is fantastic, okay, which means you can get seen a lot sooner. However, there are questions over the legitimacy of some right to choose providers, and the NHS have done a bit of a deep dive. But also, if you have a right to choose a diagnosis, GPs are more likely to refuse shared care agreements. So that is a massive problem that we're seeing at the moment as well, because ultimately it's a struggle, because what happens is when you get a diagnosis, you go on to medication. Medication for ADHD is life-changing. It is the best thing I've ever done in my life. Get onto ADHD medication. I cannot describe the emotional feeling when you take that first tablet and all of a sudden, for the first time in your life, you hear nothing in your head and you can focus. It is so emotional, you know. And the reason why there's only 1.3% recorded by GPs is because of that long wait to get onto titration, to get onto medication. So no doubt, hopefully that will actually start increasing as time goes on. But yes, that's ADHD. What other neurodivergent conditions have we got?
Autism.
There we go, autism. So, or autism spectrum disorder. And what we've got here is a situation where, again, more and more people are starting to discover more about themselves. Autism, there is no medical cure like there is with ADHD. And that's also a reason why a lot more people will self-diagnose as having autistic traits. Now, just be aware, it does not matter if somebody has a clinical diagnosis or not, okay? They are still protected under the Equality Act, okay, even if they have a self-diagnosis. So you do not need an official diagnosis to be protected under the Equality Act. The Equality Act, I think it's section 5, I think it is, basically states that you have to have a day-to-day impact on your life in order to actually qualify under the disability impact under the Equality Act. And ultimately, both autism and ADHD does have an impact on your day-to-day life. So whether they've got an official diagnosis or not, it's really important that you actually take time out of your day to actually sit down and try and understand this. So again, speak to Q, speak to us, and we can support with that. Only 1.1% of adults of the adult population have autism. Okay, let me throw this other stat at you. What percentage of those 1.1% of adults in the UK that have autism work full time, do we think?
Not many.
Not many, absolutely.
80%?
Bit over ambitious there, Alison. It's actually only 16%. 16% of people with autism work full time. Why do we think that is?
Because
the
they're
reason-
supported and it's hard.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Alison. Absolutely. Because workplaces don't understand the benefits of autistic individuals in their organisation. Because the way that they might act, the way that they present themselves, the way that they're very direct and very honest, because that's all they ever know. You know, very rarely will you come across an autistic individual that lies. That's great in an organisation. There's no white lies with an autistic individual, because they are black and white thinking. They think in black and white, they think in binary. But also, GCHQ directly attribute some of the UK terrorist incidents that have been stopped directly to neurodivergent individuals, like people with autism and dyslexia. And they value those neurodivergent conditions that much. They have specific work streams in recruitment that will work and recruit autistic and dyslexic individuals. And this is the way we should be moving, because ultimately they see the value of people able to process data differently internally, and being able to spot things out of the ordinary, that they're not following the rules. Therefore, actually, we need to flag this up. And they've GCHQ have attributed directly some of the terrorist threats that have been found and foiled directly to autistic individuals, which is fantastic. Dyslexia, what percentage do we think is dyslexic in the UK population? It's 10%. Okay, so we're getting a little bit more here. So dyslexia is all about the phonological processing of words, but also if you think that spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes on email are unprofessional, you need to just check your unconscious bias. Okay, now obviously it's called unconscious bias for a reason, because it's in your unconscious, it's subconscious. But also the way that your unconscious bias might rear its ugly head is in an interview. If someone isn't looking you directly in the eye, say for example an autistic person, when they're answering questions, you might see that as unprofessional, and therefore you're not going to give them the job. Okay, so just be aware of what your unconscious bias is. My spelling and my grammar is awful. I use Grammarly to help me on a day-to-day basis, and my study tutor at university is an angel sent from the heavens, because when I was doing my assignments, she would start to, right, Daniel, have you checked this assignment? Yes, right, I'm going to read this to you. So she would start to read my assignments that I'm submitting, and then I'm going, yeah, sounds fine, sounds fine. And then I'm like, why aren't you stopping to take a breath? Why aren't you stopping? You're going blue in the face. Why are you going, right, stop, breathe, take a breath. And she literally just said to me, what needs to go there? I went, I don't know, a full stop. And she was like, exactly. So where are we going to put this full stop? And then all of a sudden, I spent all of those years in education. I didn't really understand where to put a full stop. I was just dotting them about everywhere. And I've actually started to understand what a full stop is at the ripe old age of 38. Get me? Woo. So, you know, dyslexia isn't just about reading. It's also about understanding. It's about, you know, the anxiety of having to send important documents and things like that as well. Dyspraxia. Anyone know what this is?
Lack of coordination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you fall over or balance issues, is it?
Yeah, so it's developmental coordination disorder. And in terms of dyspraxia, people call it sort of the clumsy neurodivergent condition, because this is the one where you can just fall over. I broke my leg when I was about 8 just by falling over a white chalk line, apparently, my dad said. And I broke my ankle, I've broken my wrist a couple of times, I've fractured my elbow by slipping over thin air. And dyspraxia can be, again, very, very stressful, because ultimately you end up doing things and it's so frustrating, like bumping into things, or like, for example, I can't walk in a straight line, but also, you know, falling up the stairs. So Luke constantly falls up the stairs. Luke constantly is stubbing his toe on the bed, you know, and I mean, we can laugh about it because we understand these conditions, but I wouldn't be laughing about it if there's a member of staff walking into doors and panes of glass and all that kind of stuff. But there's 2 to 6% of adults that are thought to have dyspraxia in the UK. And that can be from, you know, hand-eye coordination. It can be, you know, judging of distances, things like that, struggling to park, reverse park, not being able to judge distances, things like that. Dyscalculia. Who knows what dyscalculia is? Kind of gave it away, haven't I? It's dyslexia, but for numbers. So I don't know times tables. So I only know my ones, my twos, my 5s, my 10s, on a good day 11s. And this is the problem. This is the frustrating thing about neurodivergent conditions. One day you can be absolutely fine. Another day you can't do it. And that's the frustrating thing as a manager. You did this absolutely fine yesterday, Dan. Why are you now making this mistake again that you made 3 weeks ago? Well, do you know what it is? It's because I've not slept. I've been awake since 2 o'clock. You know, I've not been able to process things. I've got stuff going on at home. I can't leave my problems at the door. This is why I'm making these mistakes. But it's not like you can open up with your manager about that, you know, because you just sound like you're making excuses up all the time. We've got tic disorders, okay? Very, very topical at the moment, because we've got Lewis Capaldi. Yay, he's back on the scene again. Bless him. What a legend. Tic disorders, 0.05 to 1% of the UK population. Now, the reason why it's such a huge difference there, 0.05, to be diagnosed with Tourette's, which is a tic disorder, you have to be diagnosed by a psychiatrist, and it has to be motor/vocal tics that have lasted longer than 12 months, okay? Now, a lot of tics might come and go. So vocal tics, motor tics can be transient tics or chronic tics, okay? Now, what happens is, if it lasts more than 12 months, obviously, it's going to have a huge impact on your life, because people will look at you funnily, you might tick it in the middle of doing something and people might not be aware of it. So if you are aware of someone that has a tic disorder, just make sure that they've got a place that they can go and be in a quiet area where they're not going to feel judged, that if they have a tic attack, that they can carry out that tic attack, because it is absolutely exhausting. And then finally, we have OCD. Obsessive compulsive disorder. An obsessive compulsive disorder is a neurological condition because it is deemed that actually it's a developmental learning condition. And ultimately, like a lot of these things, when you put the layer of safety over it, so when I first told you that story about me being 4, if my mom's okay, I'm okay. So ultimately, that was my safety approach. That was me actually at a deep subconscious level to go, actually, as long as everyone else is okay, I'm okay. As soon as something starts happening, anxiety goes, I start panicking, I have a panic attack, a meltdown, and it might be quite extreme to some people and go, damn, what was all that about? But actually, deep rooted at the core of that is that 4-year-old boy that nearly lost his mum. That's how serious it is, you know? And if you layer that with OCD, there are certain things that people will do where they need their own desk. They can't use a hot desk because if all of a sudden they don't know where things are, they could have a panic attack. But it goes back to that safety aspect. You know, people wash their hands continuously through COVID and using alcoholic gel and got blisters all over their hands because they didn't want to die. They didn't want to catch COVID. They didn't want to die. They can't let the family down. They can't leave a 4-year-old child. They can't leave a 10-year-old child alone without a parent. And that's why they did it. And all of a sudden it's now turned into a compulsion, you know? So around 15% of people are neurodivergent. So if you employ 100 people, nice easy maths for me there, then the chances are you're going to have about 15 people on your staff team that are neurodivergent in some form or another. So let's have a look at some of the strengths of neurodivergent individuals. Some of the things that we do here at NeuroSparks is we look to educate but also empower people. One of the biggest things that we get asked from people like Cube is, look, Dan, I've got a client who has a member of staff. They've just declared that they're waiting for an ADHD diagnosis, but this employer, they really want to support this person to be able to be the very best that they can be, because 4 years is a hell of a long time when you're a neurodivergent and you're waiting for answers. Is there anything that you can do? Absolutely there is. And I'll show you in a second what we can do. But there's some real good strengths of neurodivergent individuals across the board. So you've got things like hyperfocus, really, really good. But actually, you need to be aware that if you disturb somebody that is in hyperfocus, God help you, because it's so hard to get into hyperfocus. And you can do 3 weeks worth of work in a day. It's that good. When you're on it, you're on it. It's really, really good. You want that. But ultimately, because you can't get into it that often, if you are disturbed, you turn into a monster and a gremlin. And that's when in the workplace, you might see outbursts, you might see bit meltdown behavior, that kind of stuff. So just be aware of that. You've got creativity, problem solving, pattern spotting, persistence. Because we have dealt, just because I got an ADHD diagnosis at the age of 33, and I got a piece of paper that said, well done, Dan, congrats, you now got ADHD, doesn't mean that I had ADHD from the age of 33. I've always had it all of my life. So I've built up a series of processes, strengths, coping mechanisms. I can be with my condition. Yeah. So I'm very persistent. I don't take the easy way out, you know, and ultimately that resilience and that persistence has helped me in the business world. There you go. Creativity twice. I didn't even spot that. I've been using this for about 3 weeks. Sorted. Big picture thinking with ADHD and very detail oriented with ADHD as well. So some pinch points. Memory is awful. So I'm in the 99th percentile of short-term memory. That is not a good thing. That's a very bad thing. It means I'm the worst 1% in the world. Yes, now that's an accolade. That is why I have my Gina. My Gina is my assistant, and she helps me to book meetings. She'll remind me. She sends me a text message at 7:30 every morning going, right, you've got these appointments in. Don't forget you need to do this, that and the other. By 10 o'clock, I still would have forgot all of that. So she's literally there making sure opposite me, I've done this, I've done that, I've done the other. And that is the level of support that you can get from the DWP, because Gina is funded through the DWP and she's paid for by the DWP as my support worker. I'm time blind, you know. One of my strategies is that I'm everywhere early. If you're not early, you're late. So I'm everywhere absolutely early, because that's the only way that I can function. Density of reading, sensory overload, emotional dysregulation is huge. Before I got my diagnosis for ADHD, I was diagnosed with a personality disorder called emotionally unstable personality disorder. The psychiatrist that gave me that label, bless them, I challenged it and said, I think it might be ADHD. They said, it could be, but I can't diagnose ADHD. So this is the only label that I can give you, Daniel. Brilliant. Thanks for that, doc. And ultimately that turned into emotional dysregulation. Emotional dysregulation can be that bad at times that it can be very much described. It might be bipolar, you know, very up and down, you know, very all over the place. But it can be very, very detrimental to somebody and their life, along with rejection sensitivity. Constant worry, constant anxiety, you know, not getting a text message, not getting an email, that, you know, not being smiled at in the morning, not saying good morning to somebody can really throw them off, which can also be quite problematic in the workplace. Fatigue and bad sleep. You know, my partner Luke, he sleeps probably 2-3 hours a night. I don't know how he functions. You know, night before last, I was awake from 2 o'clock. As soon as I wake up, bing, idea, and all of a sudden I can't get to sleep. And then I do a full day at work as well. So knowledge is power. So this is what we do. Okay. So someone's waiting for 4 years for ADHD or 2 years for autism. What we do is we are able to use a pre-screening tool. A pre-screening tool which was developed by Dr. Amanda Kirby, and we use this to support clients on a one-to-one basis. So this looks for traits in ADHD, autism, dyspraxia, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and developmental language disorder. And ultimately, this gives a good indication. This is not a diagnosis. This is a little disclaimer. This is not a diagnosis of any condition, because we can't diagnose. This is purely a look at what traits you have. And what we do then is we take this and we look at the resources, and we actually create an action plan for the individual. And we use this along with coaching to be able to start educating that individual about themselves, and also about why they do these habitual patterns in the workplace, in order to become consciously aware of it. If someone's consciously aware of these patterns, what that basically then looks like is they are then aware, and then they can start to work on themselves to get better on a daily basis. So this is what we do. If the DWP and access to work, which is about 80% of our income, they tend to always grant coaching for neurodivergent conditions. They will grant at least 12 sessions of coaching with ourselves, and we always include this as a first coaching session, so we can start to understand the individual better. But also, like I said, employers will come to me and say, look, Dan, this member of staff, their performance has changed all of a sudden. We really need to help them out. They're a key member of staff. We're happy to pay to be able to help them to figure this out, and also to help us as a business, you know. So what we do offer is we do offer this pre-screening. We do a coaching session with the individual. Then we can do a coaching session with the manager on a 2-to-1 basis as well. So why is neurodiversity important in the workplace? I'm conscious of time. So it fosters creativity and innovation, because if we all thought the same and we all did the same thing, we would not be different businesses. So you want that innovation and that creativity to innovate and grow business. It enhances problem solving abilities of companies. It improves employee engagement and retention. It supports a culture of inclusivity and fairness. Because ultimately, if I know that I've got a colleague who is struggling because they are neurodivergent, because they might have disclosed that to me, and then I see the employer really going above and beyond to support that person so that they can be the very best person they can be, that gives me comfort that the company that I work for cares about its people. They're not just going to get rid of them because they see them as a bit of an odd bod, a bit of a number that actually you don't conform, so therefore you're out. You know, It increases productivity and efficiency. So on average, people with ASD, so autism, once they are comfortable and they're set up in a workplace properly, are between 42 and 146% more productive than their peers. Okay. It reduces employee turnover. It encourages a growth mindset, again, because you've got that inclusivity in mind, and it also reflects customer diversity. A customer will always know when they're dealing with a neurodivergent individual, whether they're told or not. It's a sixth sense. Alison, I'm sure you can spot people, can't you, from a mile off and go, oh, you've got the neurospicy gene, I can smell it. And ultimately you kind of know, but you want to deal with people that are like you, right? So if the community out there, the clients and customers that you're serving, sorry, Alison, is that me? Can anyone else hear? Or is that?
Yeah, I think Alison's video is just lagged a little bit.
Okay, right, no, that's fine. So ultimately, the clients that you actually serve on a day-to-day basis, if they see that, they're going to want to come back do business with you, because they see that and they understand, actually, these people are like me, so I want to do more business with people like me because they understand me and they get me, you know? So here's some principles for brain-friendly workplaces, okay? Clarity. Make sure you're setting expectations for these individuals, okay? Give deadlines, give timescales, and keep them accountable. They will really benefit from that and they'll appreciate it. Choice. Give these individuals more than one way to succeed. Sometimes people with autism only need that one way, but if you've actually got someone with ADHD that has more creative brain, if you say to them, right, you've got carte blanche, this is the problem, go and solve it, you will be surprised at the results and how well they do, because they will think innovative ways of doing it. So use tech, use different tools, use simple aids, and make sure that you are having those conversations on adjustments. Sometimes employers will come to me and say, right, well, it's been referred to an occupational health therapist. Occupational health has basically said, well, there's not really much we can do because we normally deal with visible disabilities and stuff like that. We would normally just refer them to access to work to do stuff. And that's where we get called in to have a chat with the individual and also the employer as well. So don't just take adjustments as actually this person wants to finish a little bit earlier and start a little bit earlier. You know, what else can you do? Because ultimately that individual might not know what adjustments there is out there and what they need. So ultimately, don't just rely on the individual, meet them halfway and say, okay, so we're going to get some outside help with this as well to make sure we're covering all bases for you. If people are struggling with prioritization, time and planning, a lot of people do use blocking time in diaries. So for the first hour, it might be checking emails, you know, first thing after lunch, it might be checking emails, and it gives structure to the day. But also use visual tools like Kanban trackers as well. So things like Trello, Asana, Zoho, projects, all of this kind of stuff is really good for visual prompts and visual tools. Accountability support, even if it is just somebody in the organization, the person they sit next to, can you just keep me accountable? I'm not going to be a lot. All I need is basically you just check in with me twice a week to say how you're getting on with this, that, and the other that you said that you're working on. I'm actually an accountability partner for a solicitor at the moment. She's very, very overwhelmed at the moment. She's got a lot of work on. For the first 15 minutes of every day, we jump in a call. Right, what have you got on today? Brilliant. Is there anything that's going to stop you? No. How did you get on yesterday? Did you get everything done? No. Why not? What got in the way? Was that really a priority or was that other thing a priority? And all I'm doing, I don't know anything about law, obviously. Solicitors, obviously I know about the Equality Act. But I don't know anything about being a solicitor, but you don't need to be a subject matter expert. Just being there as an accountability partner is more than enough. And make sure that you do encourage rest breaks, because counterintuitively, if someone's in their flow, it means that they're more likely to burn out if they don't have those rest breaks. When it comes to sensory and environment, let's just make sure that we've got quiet spaces, we've got soft lighting available. So if you work in a big co-working space, so for example, I've done some work with Burnley Football Club recently, and I was talking to them about doing their new office up. And I went in there and I said, it's really open plan, it's very noisy. What are the plans where you can have a quiet area where people doesn't matter if you're neurodivergent or not, can go to focus. Because what we want to do is any impact or any changes we put in place, we want it to be in universal design, i.e. everyone's going to benefit from it, not just the neurodivergent individual. Headphones, make them the norm. You know, these were paid for by the DWP. They don't have to be expensive. These are noise cancelling. It means that I can play focus music and cut out all the external noise. Has anyone heard of loops? They are very, very good, do similar, and they're only £30 for a pair. Really, really cost effective. It might be a case that you tell people in your team, look, I'm not going to be available. I'm going to put myself on do not disturb. I've got work that I need to do. Communication is key, but also consider remote work options as well. So assistive tech and quick wins, you've got speech to text software and text to speech. Really, really helpful. Grammarly, coloured overlays. So I write everything in my blue book, which I have specially designed for me because you can't actually buy these anywhere. So I have to pay a fortune to get these, but it makes my life so much easier. But also mind mapping software. One of the things that we do coaching is Eisenhower Matrix because it makes it very visual to remember things, and also visual minders as well. Now, I've mentioned Access to Work. Access to Work is a government-sponsored programme by the DWP, the Department of Work and Pensions, which pay for disabled people tools and options so that they can get into work and stay in work. So workplace adjustments and accommodations. So this will include things like software. It will be hardware. It might be headphones. They'll pay for specialist support workers like my Gina, and I will always refer to her as my Gina. So don't challenge me on that. Travel and transport. So, for example, if you are not able, if you are have a disability around mobility, and you're not able to use public transport, they will pay for taxis. And some anxiety disorders, they will also pay for taxis as well. They will give private mental health support through one of their dedicated providers, and also they'll pay for coaching and potentially workplace training as well. The thing to bear in mind is it's not a quick process. If you are offering a job to somebody and you know that they are neurodivergent, encourage them to either contact myself or do an Access to Work application before they start their job. The reason is they will get seen and sorted and get their reward within 4 weeks. Okay, that is the best way of doing it. Also, if you're in an organization, you're a business owner and you are about to go into a new way of working or a promotion or something like that, make sure that you do an Access to Work application to cover off the change of circumstances before the impact happens, because again, it takes 4 weeks and then it'll be done and dusted. If you apply for an Access to Work application and you're already in work, it's taking 29 weeks at the minute. Okay. And that's why it's really important that you speak to someone like ourselves. It doesn't cost you anything for us to do an Access to Work application for you. We do it for free. Okay. So it's really important. Other support bodies that are available. So the ADHD Foundation actually has just stopped. I need to take that off. I'm devastated. So the ADHD Foundation has actually stopped working now because the charity's gone insolvent. But the BDA Dyslexia Association, National Autistic Society. We also have online training options available as well for people, so we can help and support people at scale. And also we have training options available as well. So we have the foundations, which is one session. It's normally half a day, and we talk about stuff that we spoke about today, but more in depth. We make it as interactive as possible and bespoke to yourselves. And also we do support managers as well. So we have a session around supporting managers around neurodiversity as well. Now, obviously, Claire, what can you guys do to support businesses when it comes to neurodiversity?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we can look at things from a practical point of view. If you've got performance issues and various things going on, we would always help you with kind of the legal side of the process and understanding what you should and shouldn't be doing. But we would usually encourage you to reach out to someone like Dan or somebody else in that sphere as well to understand a little bit more about how to support those employees. But this has been really useful for me, Dan. Thank you. I've found it really, really interesting to give us a bit more of a background as well as to the sort of conversations we might need to be having with our clients. And I particularly liked the phrase at the beginning where you said you're on the right bus, but you're in the wrong seat. I think I'm going to pinch in that one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I would say don't overanalyze these things, because sometimes as a people manager, as a business owner, it's really easy just to kind of bury your head in the sand, you know, and kind of go, hopefully they'll either leave or they'll just forget that they're neurodivergent. It's not going to happen. And what you don't want to happen is they've asked for support, you don't give it, they leave, and then they put a tribunal, a grievance in against you, because we've just had one that's gone through the courts, and it's waiting to be awarded. But someone took someone to the tribunal for not giving ADHD coaching, for training in the workplace, and they've already judged that actually it was against the disability discrimination. It was disability discrimination against the Equality Act. So we do keep up to date with case law as well, because it's important that we know what's going on in the world. Has anyone got any questions at all on anything that we spoke about?
Feel free to unmute, guys, or you can pop something on the chat if you want to ask Dan a question. I will circulate his details at the end as well, so if anyone's got any questions they want to ask later on, they can always drop Dan an email. I'm sure he'd be quite happy to answer anything, within reason, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
Dan, I'm interested in something. It was something I came across previously about access to work. So I worked for a small organisation. We recruited somebody with a visual impairment, and because it was a small organisation, the government paid for the adaptive technologies that we use. Is there you mentioned though earlier, obviously when it's a larger organisation, the funding expectation for any adaptations is on that organisation. Is there actually a designated limit somewhere, just to give people an idea of, right, okay, if my business has X amount of profit a year or turnover, what are the limits there?
Yeah, so it's, if you have more than 50 employees, the maximum the business will contribute is 20%. Okay. But that is on a sliding scale. So once you get over 250 employees, I think that's when it hits the 20%. It's on a sliding scale. Any coaching, any workplace training, they will always pay 100% for. Okay. It's basically just some softwares. If you are a small business, less than 50 people, they will contribute 100% of it. Okay. And also, if cash flow is an issue, there is a way that the DWP can pay direct, because obviously, you know, when I was at Viva, they gave an award of £14,000. You know, a lot of businesses wouldn't be able to just stump up 14 grand, you know, out the back pocket. There is a way that the DWP will just pay for it directly, rather than you having to fork that money out. So again, that's something that we can help and point in the right direction of. All right.
Oh, thanks, Dan. A couple of people have just messaged say they need to drop off, but thank you very much, and they'll be in touch with you afterwards, so that's great. I have a very quick question that I think might interest a few people that we get asked quite a bit, and that's where we have employers who come and say, we've got this problem with this employee, we think they have a neurodivergent issue, but they don't think they have a neurodivergent issue. So it's almost the employer is recognizing that. What top tips could you give people to have that conversation?
I think, again, just be curious. You know, I think for me, it is about curiosity. So it might be blame me. Ultimately, look, I've been on this discussion today about neurodiversity, and a lot of the things Dan was actually saying, you know, resonated me with some of these things like that. I'm just curious, have you thought that you might have a neurodivergent condition? And sometimes head on, thank you, Barbara. Actually, head on, you will find, actually, do you know what? I've always suspected it, but I've always been too scared to kind of raise it. So normally, if you suspect it, they already know it.
Yeah.
Normally.
Yeah, that wasn't the case for me. They refused to accept it, and it got a bit messy when you bring it up. And
yeah, that's also something that you have to be very aware of, because where do you as an employer start to overstep the mark and go, and start to give diagnosis that you're really not able to give, and they were like, you know, well, who are you to say this, you know? It might be a case that actually, and this is what we do quite a lot, and it works 99.9% of the time, actually, if you're unfamiliar, if you don't want to have that conversation, let's do a foundation session where we do either a lunch and learn, or we come in and do some face-to-face training, get everyone in a room, I go through everything, and then they go, oh God, actually that is me all over. I identify myself. And 90% of my training sessions that I do face to face, we will always have someone in tears at the end of it and go, "Will you just help me? I don't know what to do. I've struggled. I'm struggling." You know, I did some training with Regatta, the clothing brand, and afterwards I spoke to 3 people. In all my training, I will always make sure that there's time at the end for people to come and speak to me one-to-one, whether it be half an hour, however long it takes. I will always stay and help people out at the end. And I had one person, and they are really struggling, to the point where I've had to raise it to HR and said, this person really needs help. It's becoming dangerous. So normally I wouldn't break that confidentiality, but when it becomes a security risk or a personal safety concern, then obviously I have a duty of care to make sure that that's raised as well. But sometimes going in and actually me doing a presentation, unfortunately, Sean, you know, it's probably too little too late for yourself, but
Yeah.
you know, in terms of that often, so kind of people then go, that sounds a lot like me. Let me speak to Dan at the end and let me get some help.
Right.
Thanks,
Okay.
Dan.
So, yeah.
Anyone else got any questions for Dan at all?
That was me done.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Dan. I think that was really interesting. Like I said, I will circulate a link to the video afterwards, and I'll circulate Dan's contact details. So if any of you do want to get in touch with him to arrange a more in-depth session, or you want a member of your team potentially to go through a bit of an assessment or some coaching with Dan, then I'm sure that he'd be more than happy to hear from you all, or indeed pass his contact details on to somebody else if you think they might benefit from it as well, because that's what we're all here to do. We're all here to help as many people as we can to function in the workplace, I guess, is the best way of putting it.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, everyone, listening so attentively, and hopefully I'll speak to you all soon.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. Cheers, guys.
All right.
Thanks for attending.
Thank you.
Bye. Awesome.
How do you think that went?
Yeah, just going to stop the recording.